Welcome to BrightStreamTV. Today's episode is all about Adobe Illustrator and how we can use it to create custom characters for, say, our e-learning projects. So earlier on this year, we created some custom characters using Photoshop, and those were photographic characters. So today is just simply graphic or illustrated characters. And so we've got a great show planned for you today. At least I think it is, and I'm pretty sure you will think so as well. We're going to take a look at Illustrator as a whole, look at some other options, and I want to preface this by saying that by trade, when I'm not an instructor, which is my profession, I am actually an illustrator. So, but I want to say this, is that I'm not a character illustrator. I'm more of a technical illustrator, but illustration is illustration. There are different techniques, and some of them kind of go across different genres. So I am not going to show you step by step how to draw a custom character. That's not going to happen. We just don't have enough time for that. But I do have some exercise files for you, so you can download those and follow along. There's only a couple of Illustrator files in there. They will be the latest versions of Illustrator. So if you're using an earlier version of Illustrator, you may not be able to open those. And what I will do is actually later today, I will go ahead and post, I'll backdate those so that you can get maybe a CS6 version or something like that, so that you can open those on your own. So like I said, for today, we're going to use a couple of Illustrator files. If you want to follow along, you can download those. If you don't, you can just sit back and watch. Like I said, I'm not going to be doing a lot of drawing. This is not how to draw these characters. It's how to optimize the process and get the most out of Adobe Illustrator and make it most efficient for creating these illustrated characters. As usual, we're monitoring the chat pod there. So you're going to see that over here, and you can just log in there. If you don't see a chat pod there, then odds are you're in the wrong place. You want to go to BrightStreamTV.com. At the top of that page, you're going to find a link that says Live Online Training. You're going to click on that, and that's going to put you in the right spot. You'll find the chat pod there. Post a message in there just to say hi, and then post your questions in there. Now, after the fact, if you've missed the time here and you didn't get to ask your question, you didn't think of the question, you can always hit us up on Twitter at #AskBrightStreamTV. Well, that's it for the preliminaries. How about we dive in and take a look at creating custom characters with Adobe Illustrator. All right, so for today, we've got a few topics here that we want to talk about, but it's all around these custom characters with Illustrator. Now, some of the techniques that we're going to discuss will work with other vector-based programs. So the first thing we're going to talk about, though, is, well, why Illustrator? Okay. Next, we're going to set up a document and use a document preset for creating these characters with the output of e-learning in mind. We're going to talk about various tips and tricks for effective, or I should say maybe efficient, character creation. And then finally, we're going to talk about how do we export all of this wonderful character goodness out into a format that we can import into our e-learning tools, such as Storyline and Captivate and PowerPoint. So today's show is a very brief show. It's a 1-hour show. We kind of like this format. It gets you what you need and gets you on with your day. So let's go ahead and dive right into creating these custom characters with Illustrator. All right. So the first topic is, well, why do we use Illustrator? And if I had to be brutally honest with you, it's because Illustrator has been around for almost 30 years and I've been using it that long. So for me, it's about the comfort with the tool. But Illustrator does have some really good qualities for creating these characters. It has a very robust tool set. Now, Illustrator is a vector-based drawing application, so it creates shapes, and those shapes, well, they are independent of one another. They can be easily manipulated. It's really simple. You just click on a shape and you can change its color, you can change its size, all types of transforms here. And Illustrator gives you a wide variety of tools for not only creating these shapes, but also modifying them. So very robust. You've got a lot you can work with here in Illustrator. And it is quite easy to use. Next, because it's been around for so long, there is a huge knowledge base about the software and how to use it. And there are so many people using it in so many different markets. It's just amazing. I'm always approached by people everywhere I go about Illustrator, and I always learn as much as I teach from other folks about how they're using Illustrator or Photoshop or whatever it might be. So there is a large database of information on how to use this tool. And then finally, it supports many file types. So if I'm having to ingest vector files, it can support various file types, including CAD drawings. But it also will export a variety of file types. So when we go to export our content for use in another application, odds are there is a file format that Illustrator supports and can export. So, like I said, if I had to be brutally honest, I chose Illustrator because, well, I've been using it for a long time. I'm very comfortable with the tool. But as I said, it does have a wide variety of features that make it really usable for this type of media creation. So, what else is out there in the way of Illustrator? You say, well, William, I'm not a member of the Creative Cloud and I don't intend to. Maybe you don't have the budget or what have you. What else can you use? Okay, well, let's take a look at just some of the options. So you say you're not going to use Illustrator. What other choices do you have? Okay, well, the first choice is still going to fall in the Adobe family, and it's called Adobe Animate. Some of you may know this as Flash. So just last week, I believe it was, it may have been the week before that, Adobe rebranded Flash, and they've done a lot of work with it to make it mobile friendly, and now they're calling it Adobe Animate. Now, Adobe Animate is a vector drawing tool, and it also adds animation and interaction. So there's a lot going on with it. Does it have as many drawing tools as Illustrator? No, but it has everything you would probably want. The really cool thing about it is that there are companies out there that create character sheets, and most of those character sheets are built in Flash. So it is quite possible that you could be using Flash to create this. Or, as I said, Animate now. Inkscape. Now, Inkscape is a completely free product, and that's probably the best thing about it, is it doesn't cost a dime. It is, once again, a vector drawing tool, very much like Adobe Illustrator. I've used it a few times, but because I am a Creative Cloud member and because I have always had Illustrator, I always come back to Illustrator. Inkscape doesn't have quite as many features as Illustrator does, but it is still a growing product. It's been around for a little while, and it's got a pretty big following. So there's a lot of information online about Inkscape. Next, we have Poser. Now, this might throw some of you if you've never heard of it before. This is actually a 3D program that has characters already built in. So you can pick from a large library of characters, but you can go in and customize those characters. And once again, this is all in 3D space. So this tool is a little bit different. The output from it is going to be a little different, but you can use this to create really complex, super realistic characters, or you can create some really just simple cartoonish-like characters. And then finally we come to Sketchbook. Now Sketchbook is starting to become my favorite application. This is brought to us by the folks at Autodesk. And they're the folks that bring us things like AutoCAD and Maya and a bunch of these other 3D and animation and just technical creation applications. But this tool is a very simplified tool, and it is pretty much, as the name implies, it's a sketching tool. So it too can be used to sketch your characters. You can fully render them out and then export them. So once again, it's a great tool. Not free, they do have a free version, but I think it's like $30 a year. So they're also like Adobe and most of these other companies, they're getting onto that subscription-based type of service. So, Sketchbook. Now, this is where I draw the line, okay? But I'm one of those fellows who I am usually dancing right on the line. I'll step a little to the left or a little to the right, depending. So if your needs demand it, you know, I don't have one of these sets over here, or, you know, I'm just more familiar with another tool, by all means, go right ahead. So I'm going to mention just a couple more options here, and then we're going to take a look at, actually take a look at a couple of these products. So let's dive right back in. So this is where I draw the line, and I draw the line here because these particular tools are pretty much meant for the type of work that we're doing. The next tool is my all-time favorite, is Photoshop. Now once again, Photoshop is not vector-based, it's raster-based. It does have some vector tools in it. And really where I use Photoshop is in a sketching type of mode. So I can do my rough sketches, get my poses and things like that, and then I will export that content over to Illustrator where I can create my nice clean shapes and then just rebuild it basically there. Okay. Finally, if all else fails, you say, well, William, I'm not an illustrator and I don't think I'm going to be able to learn to draw anytime soon. Well, you can go with some clip art. Now, most clip art, you will find a character. In our case, we're going to work with a chef, and I might be able to look for a chef piece of clip art that is vector-based, but usually you're going to find the one character in one pose. Occasionally you'll find maybe 2 or 3 poses, and that's about it. But the nice thing about it, it is clip art, so you don't have to do the drawing. You simply have to be able to open that clip art in a tool like Illustrator and then change the components you want. Maybe you want to change color, maybe you want to change the expression, maybe you want to change the pose a little bit. So clip art is a great option. And as I mentioned earlier with the Adobe Animate or Flash, there are character sets that you can purchase. These character sets are what I would consider clip art, but they are meant for the animation process of a tool like Flash. But they are out there, and they are built using the same types of techniques that I'm going to use inside of Illustrator. So, like I said, there's plenty of options here for you. If you're not familiar with Illustrator and you want to try one of these other ones on, by all means, do so. They're great, and you might find one that works better for you and your type of character creation. Now, before we dive into the actual process of creating the characters, I want to show you a couple of web pages for these products, just so you know where to find them, and then we're going to dive right in. So let's take a look. Okay. So what I've done for you here is, So what I've done for you here is to open up a couple of these pages. Now I just picked like the top 3 here as far as I'm concerned. First is Inkscape. Once again, free product, you can download it. They do have a community area here where you can learn about the tool, share ideas. There's galleries here, there's all kinds of stuff, so it's great. And it's just simply inkscape.org. Smith Micro is the company that comes up with this tool called Poser. They actually have some other ones, and I actually kind of considered this Manga Studio. It is very much an illustration tool, not so much vector. It's a little more on the Photoshop side of the house. It's more about painting and drawing. But this Poser product is really amazing because, let me just pop in here a second. I'm just going to play their little video here a second. So, I mean, take a look at this. They have characters that are pre-built for you, and then clothes and different things, and you can manipulate the colors and the shapes and the body types, and you can really get in here and create some amazing stuff. Here's a little thing about the posing. It's just amazing. Look at that. Isn't that incredible? And then you can render that out and then put it in another pose and render that one out, and then you can export these files. So that's Poser. And then lastly, like I said, my new upcoming favorite here is Autodesk Sketchbook. The video here is showing an illustrator, a comic book illustrator in this case, using this tool to sketch out maybe a comic book page or a character. And he's using a beautiful Cintiq here, but this tool is great. It's free. They do have a free version, and then they also have a pro version, and they talk about the differences there, but a very, very cool tool. It's intended for illustrators. It was built by illustrators for illustrators, if you will, and you can do really rough sketches like this, or you can get into really precision detail. And then you can see here's like a little character animation here, all kinds of cool stuff. So just a quick look at some of the other options that you have available to you. Now, we are going to stick with Adobe Illustrator for today. That's the whole purpose of this, but I did want to show you some options. All right, so we're going to dive into why we're going to use Illustrator here. I want to show you a couple of things there, and then we're going to start actually creating a new Illustrator document. What are the settings there, and then start drawing some stuff. Okay, so let's dive right back in. Okay, so what I want, if I can get these things to square away here, I'm going to launch Illustrator here. Now, I'm using the latest version of Illustrator, and so it has a slightly different welcome screen, but it's all basically the same. I'm going to create a new document, okay? So if you want to use the interface here, that's fine. They do have a new option here. They do have some presets here. I'm going to click on the new option, and it's going to allow me to pick a profile, and this is what I'm talking about. This is a preset, if you will. Now, even if you're using a little bit older version of Illustrator, it is going to have these basic profiles. You're going to have a print, web, device, video and film, and then like a basic RGB. For me, and the type of work that I'm going to be doing, I want to think about, okay, what is the output here? I'm going to output this for an e-learning tool, and odds are that presentation, that e-learning module is going to be presented on the web, okay? So I'm going to choose a web profile. As far as the width and height, so this profile is going to set that width and height. I can change this. I typically set this to the width and height of my e-learning module. So whatever that might be, you can put in a custom size here. So I think if I do something like a 720 by 540, that's a pretty standard size. To the right here, my unit of measure is going to be pixels, and my orientation is going to be landscape. Lastly, I'm going to come down here to the bottom. There's an advanced section. Now mine's already open. If it's not, you just click the little triangle here to spring it open. We're going to be working in RGB mode, the raster effects, which I just said this is going to be vector, but don't worry about it. This is going to be set to 72. You can just leave that as is. They also have this turned on by default, align new objects to pixel grid. I generally turn that off for what I'm doing here. You can leave it on if you'd like, but I generally turn it off. All right, I'm going to tell this okay, and it creates a new blank document, and I'm ready to start drawing. Now, I told you that I was not going to walk you through the process of drawing this character. I will, however, show you some of the tools here. So let's say I wanted to draw an eyeball, okay? So over here on the left, we have various tools, and there's some creation tools right up here near the top. There is a rectangle tool. If I click and hold on it, there are other tools underneath it, okay? So I would choose something like an ellipse. So an ellipse draws circles. So I could draw something like an eyeball. If I want to make sure that it's perfectly round, as I'm dragging, and that's all I'm doing here, I'm clicking and dragging, I can either look for the little crosshairs here or just hold the Shift key while I drag. And I will always draw a perfectly round circle. Okay. Well, an eyeball, well, needs a pupil. So I'll just drag out a little pupil here, and I'm going to actually kind of offset it a little bit. And my little pupil, I'm not actually going to make it perfectly round. I'm going to get it pretty close, but not perfectly round. And then I need to change the colors here. So this eyeball has kind of a white background with a black border, but the pupil, that should really be a black or a dark color of some sort. So over here on the right, I have some color sliders here, and I also have this thing called swatches. Now swatches are like a box of crayons. They're pre-built colors for you. And if I open up that swatches panel, I can choose black as my fill color. So the top of the swatches panel, the top of the color panel, in fact any panel that deals with color, you're going to have these two icons. That is your fill, which is the interior of the shape, and then the stroke, which is the border of the shape. So in this case, the little pupil doesn't need a border, so I remove the border by choosing none. And then I click on the fill here, and we can see the fill is black. Now the first shape that I drew has a fill of white with a border of black. So it's just that simple to start drawing with these shapes. Now you can start combining shapes together and doing all kinds of cool, crazy stuff, but if I take this shape, or this pair of shapes here now, I want to draw the other eyeball, and it really is going to be just a mirrored image, right? So I'll select the two shapes, and then over here in my toolbox, below the drawing tools, I actually have some transformation tools. And one of the first ones is a little arrow chasing its tail here. It's called the rotate tool. If I click and hold on that tool, I will reveal a menu here, and I have this thing called a reflect tool. So I'll choose that. I'm going to mouse out here to the eyeball, and I'm going to kind of mouse here where I think the center of the nose is, where the bridge of the nose would be. And I'm going to hold down my Alt key. This would be an Option key on a Mac. And I'm going to click right there. When I do, I'm setting the point of reference, and I'm bringing up this reflect dialog. So I'm going to choose a vertical axis, and I'm going to choose a copy command. And so it copies the eyeball, flips it over, and now I've got my little pair of googly eyes there. So I know that's very, very brief, and I told you I was not going to show you how to draw a character from start to finish. But as you can see, in just a matter of a few seconds here, you can start to create the different components for your character. All right, now I've provided you a couple exercise files. We're going to open that first exercise file where I've already drawn out several little eyeballs, little googly eyes for you, and a face. And so what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how I combine multiple shapes to create an irregular face. All right, let's take a look. So I'm just going to go up to the File menu and choose Open. Okay, I'm going to navigate to my desktop where I have this custom illustrated characters. Now this is the folder that you're going to get when you download the exercise files. And inside of there is a file called Character. So I'm going to open that up. All right. Oh, and the one thing that I wanted is missing in here. Doggone it. Let's see if it'll give me a low-res proxy. I doubt it. Nope, it won't. Okay, so my idea here is that I've got these different little facial expressions, okay? So I've got little eyes, I've got little pupils or little highlights in the eyes, I've got little eyebrows in the mouth, okay? And so these are all basically the same components, okay? The only difference here is that the eye shape maybe change ever so slightly. The position of the eyebrows changes, and then the mouth perhaps changes. And then I've grouped these different expressions together. Now I've kept this really simple. But I mean, if you look at these expressions, you can pretty much see, okay, this is either maybe happy or neutral. This one is not so happy. Here he's talking or laughing, and then this one it looks like he's in shock, in amazement. So this is the idea here. You are trying to repurpose as much of this content as possible. Why reinvent, or in this case, redraw the wheel if it's already there? Now in this case, I've got 4 simple expressions, and you can just keep building upon those expressions. Just simple modifications to the shape of the eyes, or the mouth, or the position of those elements to give you different expressions. And you say, well, William, I'm not an illustrator. I didn't go to school to learn how to draw characters. Well, not many of us did. Some of us have this innate ability to do so. We can see things and actually draw it. And if you're one of those folks, then you've got a leg up on the rest of us. For the rest of us, how do we draw stuff like this? Well, the simplest thing, get a mirror. Take a look in that mirror and act surprised, act angry, act it out, and just look at what's happening with your face. How is it being contorted? There's a lot of expression that can be done or replicated, or in this case, illustrated, just by changing the features on the face. You really don't have to do a whole lot with the body movement. The face alone is going to tell a lot about the mood. So that's the first quick tip. Try to repurpose these things and look in that mirror to find those expressions. All right, let's dive back in. So now that I've got the little expressions here, those are all set up. The other image that I wanted to show you was a Mr. Potato Head. If you've ever played with a Mr. Potato Head, and I have to say, I have one, I still have one. Mine is a Darth Vader version, but go figure, I'm a Star Wars nerd. But the Mr. Potato Head, think about that concept. You've got a potato-like shape, and then you can plug different little parts on it, pretty much like this. I can put a happy face on him, or take it off and replace it with an amazed face or a scared face, okay? So this is the idea here. If you can build these different components and just swap them out, then I just put on the happy face and I export my little Mr. Potato Head in his neutral or happy. I swap out the parts and I export it again. This time he's surprised. Okay? So that's it. That's the first tip. Learn to build these components and swap the parts out like a potato head. Now speaking of potato head, over here I've got this blue circle and these lines. Now these are just guides, and I've put these in here to just kind of help you with drawing a potato head. So let's draw a potato head. Now I've got a blue circle there. That's the basic starting point for potato head. I'm going to go over to my toolbox. I'm going to locate the ellipse tool. With it, now these tools draw from side to side. All of your shape tools except for the polygon and star tool, they all draw from side to side. So an ellipse tool is going to draw from the left, top left to bottom right, or what have you. And so that's why you have the other two linear guides here. Where those two intersect is where we want to start. I'm going to just click and hold at that point and drag down until my circle matches the little blue circle here. Then I release the mouse. Okay? I'm going to go over here to my swatches for just a moment, and I want to change the fill color. So at the top of the swatches panel, I just click on the fill square. Okay? I'm going to drag down here a little bit, and I have a kind of a little fleshy, potatoey kind of a color here. It's kind of a medium brown. I'm going to select that. And I'm going to close this panel. Now, this is just an oval. It doesn't look much like a potato, does it? So what I want to do now is add more to it. Okay? So I want to duplicate this potato shape, this ellipse. This is more of an egg than a potato. So I'm going to duplicate it. And there's different ways to do it. My personal choice, you can copy paste, that's fine. My personal choice, just for speed, is to simply hold down the Alt key, Option key on a Mac while I'm using the regular selection tool. So grab that regular selection tool, it's the very first tool in the toolbox. If I mouse over my little egg shape here, holding the Alt key will give me this double arrowhead. So now I just click and hold and drag down just a little ways. I'm not going to go too far with this. And what I've done is clone this shape. Okay, so now I have 2 eggs. Now this second egg, I need to change something about it. What I want to do is make it a little more dumpy. So I'm going to change tools for just a moment. I don't need the guides anymore, so I'm going to hide those. I'm going to go up to the View menu. I'm going to come down to where it says Guides, which is down here towards the bottom, and I'm going to choose this option to hide those guides. I don't clear them because I might need them again. So now I've got 1 egg sitting in front of the other egg. All right, next, I want to change this egg shape. To change a shape of an object here. I have these transform handles, but that's not going to do it for me, so I want to do something different. Over here in my toolbox, I have another arrow. It's called the Direct Selection tool, sometimes referred to as the hollow arrow or the white arrow. Okay? What this tool allows me to do is instead of selecting a shape as a whole, it will allow me to select one of the vector points. So in an oval, like I have here, an ellipse, I have a point top, bottom, left, and right. And as I mouse over the edge of this, that point will light up. I simply click it. And then I'm going to move over to the right. There's another point sitting right here on the right-hand side. I'm going to hold the Shift key and click that one as well. So now I have the 2 side points selected. I want to move these points down. And just so you can see it on my screen, I'm going to use the cursor keys, the up, down, left, right keys. If I start just tapping or holding that down, you'll see that those 2 points are moving down. So the bottom of my oval is not so oval anymore. It's getting kind of flat. Okay, perfect. Now it's really starting to look like an egg. It's kind of offset. The last thing I want to do is take these 2 points, the 2 side points that I have selected, and make them a little wider. For this, I'm going to use the Scale tool. So I'll head over to the toolbox. About midway down in the toolbox, you're going to find the Transform tools, and I'm going to look for the Scale tool. I'll click it once to select it, and then I'll come out here to my little egg shape here. In the center of my egg, I have a little blue crosshair, and that indicates the reference point. So it's going to scale from that point. All I'm going to do is mouse outside of the egg here to the right. I'm going to click, hold, and drag. And what I'm doing is I'm scaling that egg from the center. And I'm just going to make it slightly wider. Beautiful. So now it's looking a little more like a piece of candy corn. All right. I'm going to switch back to the regular selection tool, and I'm going to shift click on the first egg. So now we have both shapes here. But they don't really look much like a potato shape, you know, especially since this one in the front has this black outline running right through the middle of the egg in the back. So what I want to do is combine these shapes. I want to merge them together. Instead of me trying to hand draw or hand trace the shape, I'm using some simple shape tools to create it. So I've got the 2 selected here, and this is one of those tools that you're not going to find in other vector-based tools. I'm going to come over here to the left. Here in with the Transform tools, there's this funny looking little tool. To me, it always reminds me of a snowman that has fallen over and lost his head here. It's called the Shape Builder tool. I know that sounds a little dark, the little snowman here, but that's really kind of what it looks like to me. But what it's going to do is allow me to merge or subtract shapes from one another. So I'm going to select this tool. Okay? Now it will only work with selected shapes. So I can't use it on the little eyes out here because they're not selected. But when I mouse over my selected shapes, I start getting this textured pattern. Okay? And what it's telling me is this is the area that I'm going to work with. So it doesn't look at this as two egg shapes. It looks at this as multiple shapes. Anywhere these shapes overlap, that's a new shape. So what I do here is in its default mode, it's going to merge these shapes together. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to click, hold, drag from this point to this point, down to this point, so that all of the egg shapes are in this textured color. I release, and now I have one shape. Kind of looks like a potato. Okay, now, next, I'm going to switch tools here. I have a pencil tool here. This version of Illustrator comes with this new shaper tool. Really awesome, but a little more than what we can get into here. So I'm going to just switch to the pencil tool. You'll find this underneath your shape tools. Okay. Now, for the pencil tool, it works, well, like a pencil. Does this look like a pencil to you? Doesn't to me. It works, but if you know me at all, then you know that I never go anywhere without my Wacom tablet. And yes, I've been corrected. It is Wacom, not Wacom. Anyway, this is a graphics tablet, really inexpensive. It will replace your mouse. And it works great when I'm drawing things because instead of using a mouse, I'm using a pencil. So we're going to dive back in. If you don't have a Wacom tablet or some other brand of tablet, that's fine. You can use the mouse to do this, but this is a little more natural feeling. So let's dive back in, and I'm going to modify this shape using the pencil tool in my Wacom tablet. So now that I have the pencil tool here, let's say that I wanted this shape here to be, well, I don't want this little indent here. I want to smooth this out a little bit. So to do that, I'm going to use the pencil tool. Now, I have to have this potato shape selected. Okay, so I'm going to select it first. And then as I use the mouse near it, or the pencil tool near it, what it will allow me to do is actually reshape this shape. You see, as I draw, it reshapes the potato. Now I'm going to undo that. And what I want to do is I just want to smooth this out a little bit. Like so. Maybe not. Try it again. And I can just keep going back over this and over this till I get the shape that I want. It's pretty cool. So I'm reshaping this with the pencil tool so I can add a little irregularity to it. Makes it look a little more like, well, like a hand-drawn piece. Okay, so there we have it. There's our potato shape. That's the basic potato head shape. And so now what I can do is I can start dropping these elements on top of it. Now, when I move these shapes over, uh-oh, what's happening here? Well, because I've drawn the potato shape after I've drawn the facial features here, it is in front of those facial features. So, Illustrator comes with this wonderful feature called Layers. And I'm going to open up the Layers panel. You'll usually find this over here on the right-hand side of your screen. And every Illustrator project has at least one layer. Okay? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename that layer. I'm going to just double-click the name there, Layer 1. And I'm going to call this, let's call it Tater. I'm going to create a new layer. So down at the bottom of the Layers panel, there is a new layer icon. I'll just click on that. And this, I'm going to call this maybe Expressions. Okay? So I still have my little happy or neutral face selected, but it's behind the potato. If I look here in the Layers panel, the Tater layer has this little blue light beside it. And when I mouse over it, it says this indicates the selected artwork. So I'm just going to drag that little blue light up onto the Expressions layer, and now the little face is on top of the potato. Okay? So what we'd want to do is just do that for the rest of these. I can come over here with the Selection tool and click on these other shapes and just move them all to that Expressions layer. And so now I have my little simple potato head. I can start exporting these out with the different expressions on them. Okay. So this works great if you have a really simple, just a face here that you want to use. Maybe a real simple character. There's not going to be a lot of movement. You're just going to put the different expressions on the face. And you can get a lot out of that. But what if you want to draw the body of the character and maybe have the character pointing to different objects on the screen? This sort of thing. Well, we have a project for that, and we're going to take a look at just some of the ways that I've set that up and some of the things that you can do to help make that process a little easier for you when it comes time to repurpose for pointing here and pointing, say, here. Let's take a look. All right. So I'm going to leave my little character shape here. I'm going to go to the File menu, and I'm going to open the next project. So this one's a little more complicated. It's really not that bad in the grand scheme of things, but it's called Chef. So I'm going to open that up. Here you can see I've implemented some gradients here to give a little tonal value, but it's still essentially the same thing. It's just Mr. Potato Head now has a costume and he has a body here. So the things that are going to remain the same are going to be things like his uniform, his hat, and his head. Now his arms are going to move, his facial expressions are going to change. And because this artwork is just a tad more complicated, I got a little more complicated with the Layers panel. So let's take a look at that Layers panel first. If I open my Layers panel, I'm actually going to tear mine off here so that you can see it and expose it a little bit more. And let me see if I can make the thumbnails a little larger here. There we go. And so now here I've gone in and I've tried to tear apart this illustration a little more with the layers. So the nose is the very top layer. So whatever's on top of this layers panel is closer to me. So all the other artwork is behind the nose, and the reason behind that, no pun intended, is look at the eyes. The eyes actually fall behind the nose. The nose kind of covers it up a little bit. So in order to keep that, I put the nose on a layer by itself and pushed it here to the very top. Awesome. We'll zoom out a little bit. Then I've taken the different expressions. So before I was just dragging the expressions on the face, taking them off. In this case, I went ahead and took it a step further. I put each expression on its own layer. This way I can turn on the layers that I want, export the file, switch the layers out, export the files. So I'm making the process quicker and more efficient. Okay. So how do you determine what goes where? Well, think about the basic components: his hat, his uniform, his face, the ears. Now, when I say his face, I guess I really should say his head, because his face would be the eyes and the mouth and all that stuff. So those things generally don't change, okay? So those are separated and then they're locked, so they don't get changed. But now his arms, I'm going to move his arms and his facial expressions. So that's how I determine, the things that move, the things that change, those are going to get their own layers. Okay. So let's take a look here. I've got the happy face on, but here in the layers panel, you have these little eyeballs. And so right here beside the happy layer, I'm going to poke that little eyeball. And so his face disappears. Above the happy face, I have a neutral face. And if there's no eyeball there, but if I click where the eyeball should be, you can see the neutral face comes on. I'll turn that back off, and then we have a mad face. And so you can see that the components are basically the same. Some simple changes to the shapes and the positioning of those elements will do a lot in giving the expression here, okay? So setting the mood. All right, I don't like the happy face or the mad face. I'm going to go back to the happy face because we want to be happy when we're doing this. All right, now what about the arms? Okay, so now we're starting to get a little more complicated. I'm going to scroll down here a little bit and we can see the arms. So the arms, I've done basically the same thing. I have the arms down, so this would be kind of a neutral pose. And then how about a celebratory, I'll get that out in a minute. He's going to celebrate. Yay! You've done something right. Arms are up. And so really all I've done is taken the arms that were down and flipped them. Now I did have to change the sleeves a little bit. So those are different shapes here in the arms up pose. But really the arms, the forearm, the hand, and the biceps here, they're still the same. They're just repositioned. Once again, getting the most out of your illustration. Don't reinvent the wheel if you don't have to. All right, so the last one here, and the part of this exercise that I want to show you is this one. Arms up, pointing. So his right arm is down. I just simply duplicated from the arms down layer, and then I duplicated from the arms up layer this arm. And I wanted you to see how these things are composed. So if I come over here and I select this arm, we have an outline of the arm, we have the color of the arm, but notice how the outline doesn't go beyond the end of the arm. It doesn't close the arm. Okay? Look at his bicep. It's the same thing. I have the color of the bicep and I have the outline of the bicep as a separate shape, and this particular end of it where it meets the forearm, they're not closed. Okay? So this gives me the flexibility. Let me undo this. It gives me the flexibility to say, well, let me grab his lower arm here and then maybe take the rotate tool, select his elbow joint here, and then rotate his arm around. Now, his arm is behind his body, so right over here, I can take a look at this. The arm is behind the body in this layer. If I move the arm layer up, yeah, it does okay, but now I can start to see some of these little overlaps. So in this case, you might want to take just the forearm and move it above the body, not the whole arm layer. Okay, so I'm going to pull this arms layer back, okay? And I'm going to reset my little hand here so it's down by his side. Beautiful. But how did I come across with this outline here? So here's the basic component over here. Here's the forearm. Now the bicep has already been created for you, so it is already separated. We just need to fix this part. How do I do this? Now once again, this is where Illustrator really starts to shine. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to separate the arm. Right now that arm has a fill and a stroke. What I want to do is go to the Object menu. I'm going to choose Expand. Now this command will expand both the fill and the stroke. It will convert them to separate shapes. I tell that OK. This object, even though it still looks the same, it is a group, and it's actually two objects that are grouped together. So I need to edit just the outline. To do that, I'm going to use the regular selection tool, and I'm going to double click on the group. Click, click. Notice how the rest of the shapes go dim. Okay? I'm in isolation mode. Now I'm going to click one more time, just once, on the forearm, and this is going to be the color section. How do I know that? If I look over here in my tools panel at the very bottom, there is your fill and your stroke. So I have a fill of the flesh color and no stroke, so there's no border. This object I am going to lock. Okay? So I go to the Object menu, Lock, Selection. That way I can't modify the fleshy part of the arm. However, I can select the outline. And when I look at the outline, it is not a line or border or stroke anymore. It has been converted into a shape. So it's a circle or a shape within a shape. Okay? And so when I look at it, it is filled with that black color. All right, here's the real magic here. I've got this shape selected. Over here in my tools panel, in my drawing tools, I have an eraser tool. What does the eraser tool do? Erases things. But it works really kind of weird here. If I have something selected and I start erasing, it looks like it's erasing his arm and all the color. Look at this. I'm going to run up in his arm like that. All right, it looks like it's erasing all of that stuff, okay? Even, as far out as I can go. But what happens when I release the mouse? Boom, the fleshy part comes back. If it's not selected, the eraser tool can't touch it. So that's the key. Make sure you have the object that you want to erase selected first, then erase. Now, I am creating that shape. See here, now the outlines are stopping, and I do want them to go in a little bit just to kind of give the idea that it's a different segment of his arm. I want to unlock the forearm here. Object, unlock all. Now I'm through modifying the forearm. Out here in the background, I'm going to double click. There's nothing out here, so I'm going to double click. That takes me out of that isolation mode. So now, if I click on the forearm, it's still grouped together. That's both the fleshy part and the outline. So now when I want to change the pose of this, once again, I use my transform tool, in this case, rotate. Maybe I want him to point straight up in the air. Okay? All I have to do is reposition it ever so slightly to get the outlines to line up. Maybe I want him to point straight out. Just simply rotate, and then perhaps move it ever so slightly. So whatever you need, that's what you can do. And by building it in these little mini components like this, you can get away with this. Now, what if I want his arm to kind of point out to the side? Well, that's the arm and the bicep and the sleeve. So I need all of these components. And then I just simply rotate them based on, let's say, his shoulder joint. So there you have it. Mr. Potato Head here, where you can switch out of his expressions and then also move or marionette his positioning. And that's the key here. You want to create basically a marionette, something that you can pose and not have to redraw each one of those poses. Why do that when you're using a tool like Illustrator, which allows you to create those little mini components, those little groups, and put them on separate layers? Well, that's the real reason why we use a vector-based drawing tool. It gives us that flexibility. Now, how do we get this content out so that we can put it in something like Storyline? Well, let's take a look. Now, this process is just as simple. I've got my pose. I'm going to go up here to the File menu. The first thing I'm going to do is save my document because I've made some changes. Next, I'm going to go to the File menu once again, and there's a couple of options here. There is one option that says Save for Microsoft Office. So if you're going to Office products, by all means, use this. If you're not, the method that I like best is this one, Save for Web. So whether I'm going to Microsoft Office, or I'm going to put this on a website, or I'm going to put this in, say, Storyline or Captivate, I'm going to choose Save for Web. And then over here on the right, this whole dialog pops up, and I have some presets over here on the right. Now there's only 3 different file types that I can create, a GIF, a JPEG, and a PNG. My personal choice is the PNG. PNG and GIF both support transparency. And so the little checkerboard that you see behind the chef now, that is transparency. That's the transparent pixels. And that's exactly what I want. But only the GIF and the PNG will support that. Now, what's the difference between the GIF and the PNG? Well, really the only difference here is that the GIF cannot support as many colors. So if you have a lot of color variations, a lot of smooth gradients and transitions, the GIF isn't going to support that. So you're going to get some banding. It's going to flatten those colors out. The other thing is the way it goes about creating the transparency. If there's any type of let's say softness to the edge. Maybe you have, I don't know, maybe it's a smoke-like effect or a drop shadow effect. The GIF can't support that, so it's going to fill in behind that smoke or that softness effect with white. So in those cases, especially if you have a soft edge, something that's going to go to transparency and transition, use a PNG. Okay, well, let's dive back in, let's export this, and let's see what we get. So getting back in here, I'm going to choose, in this particular case, I'm going to go with a PNG. And I generally always go with a PNG over a GIF. I want to make sure that transparency option is turned on. And then the image size. Now by default, Illustrator is going to choose this option, clip to artboard. But that may not always be the best solution. Now in this case, it is, because as I change the different poses, it's not going to matter. Chef's going to stay in the same spot, and my image size is always going to be the same size. So I generally do keep that turned on. And I simply click Save. So I'm going to say this is Chef Point Mid. Just going to drop this in my custom characters folder here and save it. Now, what about, I want a different pose. I want Chef Angry. Okay, well, maybe he's not pointing. Maybe his arms are down, and then his mad face is on, not his happy face. Now, I go to File, Save for Web, and I'm going to use those same settings. They're already set up here. I don't have to change a thing. And this is where that clip to artboard is really going to come in handy, because now it's exporting the same dimensions every time. Click Save, and this is going to be Chef Mad. You could place it in Storyline. You could place it in something like PowerPoint, and then when you're ready for the next change in the pose, you select the image and you replace the image with the next pose. So there you have it, creating custom characters with Adobe Illustrator. And as I said, we didn't get too much into the drawing of the characters. You did see some of the really cool and useful tools there, such as the Shape Builder tool, the Eraser tool, using layers to your advantage. And so hopefully that gives you a little better understanding of how to create these components. Now, I'm using Illustrator, but these same techniques can be used in other tools. They may be called different things, but typically layers are layers, and then shapes are shapes. Whether you have those merging types of tools, they might be different. As I said, this one's called the Shape Builder tool. You may not have that in another application, so you may have to find another way to create those more complicated shapes. But it can be done. And at the end of the day, if you create the different expressions and keep those separated by layers, that's going to help you a lot. You'll be able to actually work it like a potato head. You will be able to take one layer off, put another layer on, and then exporting your files. Choose a PNG or a GIF, and that's usually the best way to go because it gives you that transparent background. Well, that's going to do it for this particular course. Hopefully, you got a good understanding of what it is that we're doing. As I said, if you have a question after class, feel free to hit us up on Twitter or via email. Well, that's it for today's show. I'm William Everhart, and I want to say thank you for all of you joining us. Come back here each and every Friday for some free training. If you like the training and you'd like to see some other shows, take a look down below. There are some of our past shows. You can subscribe and unlock all of those, or you can buy them individually. Like I said, we're always welcome to comments and questions about the content there. So have a great day, everyone, and we'll see you next time right here on BrightStreamTV.